You're listening to the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring author, guest, and criminal defense lawyer, Laurie Hellis.
Why did it take so long for anybody to look into this on a serious level? I mean, there had been red flags for many years. Is that this our horrible system as it is when it comes to child protective services? Not the people in it. I've always have to be careful with that because there are many people in it who work their ass off and are not funded. They don't have the resources to do their job correctly. They're doing the damn best that they can. I'm not insulting the people, but the system itself is horrible. Is it more that the system that's broken, or is it something else that allowed this to continue on? Meaning more so Ruby's ability to transform as the narcissist that she is when somebody wants to take a look behind the curtains.
Well, I think that's a great question, and I think it's a little of both. During my practice, I did a fair amount of juvenile work, including representing both children and parents in child welfare cases. So it's a system I'm very familiar with. And I think one of the problems that people don't understand is that in every state, there is this tightrope between the rights of a parent to raise their children as they see fit, and when that tips over into abuse and neglect. Mm-hmm. And so there always has to be a clear red flag that whatever this parental behavior is, it poses a real threat to the children. And so CPS investigators are always sort of walking that fine line.
Sure.
And when they remove children, then they have to go in front of a judge and they have to make the case to the judge that that there is a threat of harm to the children. Mm-hmm. So they go into a home and they see a home that is appropriately furnished. The kids have food. They appear to be being homeschooled in a responsible way. They're looking at it and going, this may not be the way I would raise my children, but that's not the standard. The standard is there a true risk of harm, a threat of harm to these children. So I can see where in this case, where you have a fairly upscale environment and a lot of church influence, where Child Protective Services might say, I have my suspicions, but I don't have anything that I can hang a case on for removing these children.
Sure.
So I think there were red flags going on all along. And I think it goes hand in hand with the issue of the agencies being under-resourced.
Yeah.
Because if you have a case that you've investigated, a family that you've investigated before, and said, well, there might be red flags, but I don't think there's real abuse going on, and you do that a couple of times, the next time you go out there, you give it sort of a cursory look because you've got 6 other cases you've got to investigate that probably do have children that are being abused. Yeah. So, it's sort of a combination of both those things.
Are we getting to a place, because there's obviously homes that, almost one could look at from the street and go, no child should be in that house. But then you have ones like this where they're higher end, they're nicer, everything seems to be looking very pristine. You got the 20,000 narcissistic photos of mom on the wall, smiling in 52 different ways, and everybody looks happy and wonderful. Are people getting better at hiding this stuff, like where there is more that should be looked on beyond the surface, not just the atypical, well, this looks like a pretty rundown home with irresponsible people, almost like the analogy of thinking of an alcoholic always being on the corner with a bottle and a paper bag and, just looking disheveled. That's usually not the alcoholic. It's usually the guy in the corner office that's running the place or something of that nature, one you wouldn't expect it to be. I'm wondering how much of that and how much a better society has gotten at in those sort of roles of hiding this type of behavior than they used to be.
Well, sure. And I think you can point right at the internet. Mm-hmm. And you can point right at, you can look and see many cases where people are able to hide things because they're more aware of what the state's looking for. And I think that it is more difficult when you have the meth parent whose children are being neglected because the parent's high all the time, and it's evident. The caseworker and the police go in, and it's very obvious there's no food in the house, and the kid's wandering around in the parking lot at midnight in his underwear because mom is passed out somewhere.
Yeah.
Those are the cases that it's evident that there's something going on. But certainly, as in the Ruby Franke case, it's much easier. It's more difficult to suss out whether or not the children are actually being abused. And emotional abuse and emotional neglect are much more difficult to prove than the run-of-the-mill neglect in a household that's filthy and a parent that's not available. So it's a lot harder to find that, to clearly find that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. It's also a reflection just of how we handle mental health in our country to begin with, too, where it is looked at as like, well, there's physical health and mental health. Mental health always kind of takes the back burner, even though that's almost the key to everything in life is your mental health. But we somehow put a less of importance on it than physical health and the things that we can immediately see.
Absolutely.
A tragic case.
Absolutely.
There.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
I think it's a very unfortunate case. It's another one of these kind of perfect storms. Yeah. You have Ruby Franke, who seems at least somewhat vulnerable to Jodi Hildebrand's brand of therapy.
Yeah.
And, it's a therapeutic relationship. So you go into it sort of allowing yourself to be vulnerable and sort of surrendering yourself to the process of therapy. And if you have someone who is unscrupulous and is going to take advantage of that, then you have someone who's preying on the vulnerabilities of their clients.
You're consuming the Hidden Killers podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.